So welcome back to Sika Strength, welcome back to Sika Stand. This is part 2 in the 300 kilo Q&A. So the first video, there was a lot of questions after I made the video that I wanted to get to, which are very, very good questions. And one of the first things I wanted to mention that I didn't mention in the main video was that I actually didn't miss a single squat for the whole training block. So before I started the training block, when I failed at 220, that was the last squat I failed in the year of 2023. Now, this actually doesn't matter that much, so this might sound like a useful piece of information, but I did find that it was actually quite a novel piece of information for anyone wondering about how that progression went. It's actually not that big a deal to miss squats every so often. It's not a major issue once or twice in a training block. It's preferred not to, because a miss isn't in any way beneficial. It shows you went too heavy for that particular set or for that particular session, but it doesn't really make a major difference. Heavy squats are pretty easily recovered from. Now, a max deadlift where you fail and you grind it out, pretty fatiguing, but a heavy squat is no more fatiguing than if you'd made that squat, for example, or if you'd made 5 kilos less. And the assumption is that if you missed a squat, you would have been going heavy anyway, and that the program would have been accounting for that. So it's actually not that big an issue to miss squats every so often. It's not something you need to be like, oh man, I missed that squat, I'm going to ruin the whole training block. But for me, it was just because I was incredibly aware of my body. I've been squatting for such a long time. These are weights, all the weights I've done before, except for 300 kilos. I've touched every one of these weights, touched them inappropriately, so I know exactly what is going to happen at those weights. So it's not surprising that I did miss. I make it a point in my training not to miss things, and it's just I thought it was quite novel. So let's get on with some of the questions. So first is, even though I ran the RTA multiple times, do I still think it would have worked? Yes, because first of all, we've seen literally thousands of people run it multiple times, 3 or 4 different times, and it works. But programming doesn't need to change for absolute strength movements like that. There's no real difference. Some of the assistance work can change, the numbers change, but the actual progression and volume when it comes to specifically squatting just doesn't change. I have powerlifters for, say, up to 2 years, and we might have the same assistance work for 6 months in a row, sometimes a year in a row, because that progression will keep happening. We'll do the same stuff with just different numbers, and it'll just keep racking on the plate, adding numbers on. So a good program will keep working. You don't have to change a program just because you've run it once. Sometimes in more complex systems and more complex training endeavors, you know, if we're looking at speed or if we're looking at technical options or skill development, we might need to be a little bit more dynamic and adjusting things. Like for weightlifting, we do need to change it a little bit. Sometimes, not a whole amount, but certainly much more than absolute strength. So the RTA, as it was working, I was halfway through the second run, I was making great progress, but then I got caught up in some fun challenges, and as I say, I don't regret it. Is the Toshiki method a Bulgarian approach with sub-maximal? So in the cultural sense, it is kind of Bulgarian, but the real answer is no. So Bulgarian is all about intensity and high frequency for singles. But the cultural assumption when it comes to Bulgarian, when we talk about something being a Bulgarian approach, is it's highly sport specific. So that was one of the groundbreaking things Ivan Abadjiev came across when he started the Bulgarian method, was high amounts of sport specificity. And that's kind of what this is. So in the absolute programming sense, it's most certainly not Bulgarian. But in the cultural sense of the mindset behind it, it is pretty Bulgarian, you could say, in that regard. So if we're being pedantic, it's definitely not in the absolute sense in terms of the Bulgarian program. But when it comes to the actual the mindset behind it and the intention behind Toshiki's approach, I think it's fair to assume it's somewhat Bulgarian. But obviously the Bulgarians hated volume when athlete was in their adult career. They did lots of Soviet style training as teenagers on the way up, but once you got to that final version of yourself, you were very largely focused on those singles. Now, an interesting note, one of the best ever squatters in weightlifting, Artem Manchipov, so he's one of the few individuals to squat 320, so he did 322, especially as a non-super. Is, you know, double-digit number of people in weightlifting have ever done that. And he told me he squatted once a week, just one back squat a week. Now, they did lots of front squats. Obviously, Artem tested positive, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he squatted once a week heavy, didn't do any reps. They did loads of front squats throughout the week. If you look at the Kazakhstan program, that's very similar to Bulgarian approach. It's actually modeled very closely to it. And you can actually see a paper submitted to a scientific journal in Kazakhstan, I think. You can actually get access to somewhere if you look for it. And we've done a video on that. But they did loads of front squats, sometimes 2 or 3 front squats a day. And if you watch Ilya Ilyan's journey into 2014 Worlds, you'll see him doing multiple squat sessions. So barely 1 or 2 back squats. They really wanted that sport specificity. But you can make that progress, you know, it's not exclusive to be highly specific like that. When did I use knee sleeves, and should you use them for as long as possible? So I put on knee sleeves about February, March, April, about into April. So about 3 months into the training block. I'd done most of the last couple of years. After I did 290, I essentially took off the knee sleeves just because I just didn't really need them. It's actually better for weightlifting if you don't wear knee sleeves in regards to the sport of weightlifting. It's better in the snatch, at least. It slightly slows down your descent. It slightly reduces the depth you can hit on the bottom of a snatch, all of which you don't need for the snatch. Now in the clean, it's a little bit different, and it's not a massive difference, but I prefer it without it. You get a better bottom position, you get into the bottom position a little bit faster, you've better control over your knee movement. But when it comes to squatting, it's still fine to wear those knee sleeves, but obviously I had such a reserve of strength for my lifts that I could squat heavy enough without sleeves that it didn't really make a difference. So I put them on around April. I think I'd done 200 for a couple of reps at that stage, and I was like, right, now's the time to put on the knee sleeves, and we'll start adding in the belt then around that stage. So the belts and sleeves are something that's quite interesting. Someone was wondering, could I squat at 300 kilos without it? So I squatted 290 without a belt the first time. I'm confident I could squat them without that. Obviously, if I can squat 10 kilos less without a belt isn't going to make that much of a difference. I did a 250 kilo pause squat. It was like 3.5 seconds or something. No belt, no shoes, no sleeves. And it was very, very easy. So it probably taken a bit longer, but I'm sure I could squat 300 kilos without the equipment. It's not an outlandish thing to say. For weightlifters in the high bar squat, sleeves help a bit. Maybe if you're not used to training without them, you could get between 5 and 10 kilos if you're a well-trained athlete. The belt is more of a confidence thing for some weightlifters. It kind of depends on that athlete, and then a combination of that, then, you know, it depends on the lifter. But they don't make as big a difference as like super tight knee wraps. You know, they help for sure, and if you train a lot on them, they help, but they're not going to give you massive progress on your lifts. Sometimes what they are kind of useful for is a little bit of extra volume. So if you're doing like that 5x5, it can make it a bit more reproducible to get that last set of 5 instead of the last set of 3 maybe, or something like that, which is not something people talk about too much. When I hit 200 kilos the first time and I did it for a triple, did I plan that? Yes, I did. When I wanted to squat 200 kilos, my goal was to absolutely demolish it. I wanted to do it for at least a double. I didn't want to just squat 200 kilos the first time I did it, just do it for a single. I was like, I'm going to rep 200 kilos. We're going to hit this for a lot of reps. So when I did it, I probably could have done it for a set of 5 the first time, looking at that video. So it was just something I just wanted to do. I just kind of wanted to really smash through that barrier and set the tone for my squatting career. And 200 for 3 was pretty much the goal. So I just waited until I knew I was pretty capable of it. I think I done 190 for 3x2, and then I did it then at 200 kilos. Supplement and diet. So supplement and diet, I just do whatever Alex tells me. I have a passing interest in nutrition, but I'm probably going to do a full day of eating because I am finally leaning out, which I'm pretty happy with. But I'll wait till I'm fully in a place where I'm happy with that physique to do a kind of a full video on that, as it's a novel training goal for me at the moment. But supplementation, I listed most of those. The biggest thing last year, one of the most interesting things from Alex, was 2 different things. Now, I just want to preface this. I do not recommend you go use some of these things. This is entirely up to you. But one of them was choline. So choline is something that is actually, I think it's a really moderately appropriate to recommend. Choline is an essential nutrient. Comes in multiple different forms. The form you use is quite interesting, but choline is something essentially that's used in the process of neurotransmitters, and obviously these are used heavily during intense training sessions, and replenishing these before training, especially if you work for a long day, is super beneficial. So choline is very, very interesting. Choline citrate, or alpha GPC, or Alex talked about injectable carnitine plus choline, and they are quite interesting products to use. And choline was very, very interesting in regards to pepping up a little bit before training. Alpha GPC is quite interesting. Some interesting stuff about alpha GPC. You can't actually buy alpha GPC in Europe or most European countries because it interacts with GABA, and any interactions with GABA in Europe is considered somewhat of an interaction that's similar to antidepressants or similar drugs like that. So they have regulated a little bit more. Very easily bought online and shipped in. It's not exactly, you know, regulated that strongly, but you can't sell them or buy them without a prescription in most European countries, Ireland being one of those countries. But choline citrate is very possible, and there's choline bitrate, all of which you can buy from them. One of the other things that was very, very interesting was the use of new pep. Now, new pep isn't banned by any of the organizations around the world, any sporting activities. Something that you can use for learning. Now, this is a little bit more grey area. This is certainly a nootropic, and I'm not saying you should go use this whatsoever. Just really want to preface that this isn't in any way medical advice, and you should, of course, engage with this if you do through your own absolute actions and your own research. It's not like with injuries. I want to talk about this specific subject, but new pep was something that is used for learning. Alex talked about college students, PhD students use it for learning. I found it incredibly useful for learning movements, stuff like jiu-jitsu, weightlifting, you know, all of that stuff is very, very interesting. So in regards to new pep, I think it's just something that might be useful for weightlifters. I'd be interested to see in terms of weightlifting if people use it, international weightlifters, if it's known about. So there's different varying dosages. It's not that hard to get. You just need to obviously find a trusted supplier. It's not illegal or anything like that. It's just it's an interesting product. There's a lot more to it, and there's better people out there who could explain it, because that's not a route I want to be going down in regards to education for the channel. But people did ask, and I did mention it, so it is quite interesting. Alex is the best. Alex Keekel is the best person to ask about that. But that was very interesting in longer sessions when I was doing weightlifting sessions with Anton. It was quite interesting in regards to assimilating the information and still being kind of fresh. How emotional was it to fulfill my destiny? So, you know, I always think there's a quote I've heard before, which is everything that's ever happened to you has been waiting since the beginning of time to happen to you. So I think it's quite interesting. Now, maybe destiny is a strong word, but how good did it feel essentially to hit 300 kilo squat? I'll tell you, the best it felt was 270 kilos for 5, because at that stage I'd already celebrated my victory. I already knew I was going to squat 300 kilos. I was so happy after 270. As I did it, I was like, it's done. 300 kilos is happening. On my worst day, I'm hitting 300 kilos. On my best day, it's 300 kilos. I knew it was done. As soon as I finished that 270 for 5, I knew from the start of last year, it had to be 270 for 5. So as soon as I hit 270, it's the happiest I've ever been about a PB for that length of time. I'm talking 2 hours later, I was high. I was so happy. It was so fucking good. It was unbelievable after I hit that 270. I can still remember the feeling of that now, that 270 for 5, because it was done. I knew it was over. I knew I was going squatting 300 kilos. So I suppose the 270 for 5 felt pretty good, which in effect was a representation of hitting 300 kilos for a single. So that for me was pretty great. Yeah. What would I have done if I wanted to keep going? So if I wanted to keep going immediately after that, I would essentially have done pretty similar stuff. I would have headed for 250 for sets of 5, then 260, then repping 280, then obviously trying to rep 300. Could I have kept going? Whoa, could I have kept going? I probably could have kept going for 305 or 310, maybe. But I just don't think my body would have held out for more time hitting 320. Maybe it would have happened. I reckon I probably could have hit a 305, you know, maybe 303 to 310, depending on how things went, but I did not want to. As soon as I finished that 300, for me, it was over. It was nearly a year-long training block. So what would I have done then was just keep going with the same kind of training, about 3-ish heavy sessions a week. I would have kept the specificity high, because in that situation, I couldn't drop all that volume and all that specificity of squatting and expect to keep making progress. I'd have to keep that ticking over for that training block. Now, what would I do now if I wanted to progress again? And if I will come back for a bigger squat PB, which I might, I'm not sure. It would be looking like probably 3 times a week of squatting and pretty high specificity. I would give a lot of attention to the squat again. Be honest, to hit 320, I really would have to let a lot of other things go in my training. Like, mostly the weightlifting I'm doing now would have to go. Jiu-jitsu would probably suffer a bit again. Probably have to stop sprinting. Plyometrics would have to go. And that would be okay if I made that decision for the goal. But I wouldn't squat 5 times a week again. It would be completely pointless. I'd probably squat 3 times a week. Probably 2 big sessions and 1 moderate session. And then I would focus similar progression to the RTA 1, RTA 2. Just working my way through the progressions and the blocks and hitting something. Now, the good thing, if I was to ever do it again, if I was to do it something this year or something, I would hopefully be in a much better scenario of progression, because I wouldn't be so detrained in terms of the squat. So I would also like to be bigger and leaner. So I probably wouldn't go back to 110, but I might have to go back to 110 if I wanted it, which would be okay. But I'd prefer to be like somewhere between like 106 to 108, but in a leaner body and more muscle, much more upper back muscle, much more single leg work would be some of the stuff I would change. So keeping that upper back hypertrophy, probably some more core work as well. I think that would benefit. Sometimes in the heavier reps, my hip stability, I could feel it when I was a bit fatigued, was a little bit unstable, and some single leg work and more core work would have helped a lot with that. Now, I kind of brute forced it by so much squatting and I adapted, but it could have been more specific and much more strategic in my improvement of that little hip wiggle. Now, some videos you actually can't even see it, but I could feel it, and it feels like it's so much to you when you're standing there with that weight, but in actual fact, it's not a huge amount, but it's enough to feel it. And when there's 280 in your back and your hips are wiggling, it certainly feels not great. So I'd be doing a lot more specific upper back work, more core work, and more single leg work to make sure that I was hitting all the stuff I needed to do, and then making sure that I would stay relatively lean at that. And you know, I was never fat. I know I joked about that. I certainly wasn't anyway obese, but you know, it's not as lean as I like to be, is what I would put it as, you know. So that's just follow progressions, normal increments in intensity and the decreasing volume, and then working my way through that midsection for a long time. Those kind of 8s to 3s or 8s to 4s, and once I hit certain milestones, then we'd progress singles and reset and keep going. So just normal programming, I suppose. Is it worthwhile for a powerlifter to follow a similar approach for one lift? No. For a powerlifter, if you're powerlifting and the assumption that you're a competitive powerlifter and your sport is the squat, bench, and deadlift, and realistically, unless one lift is incredibly lagging, it might be in circumstances where focus on it more, but in reality, it's detrimental to the other two lifts. You need to focus on everything you're doing, and you can focus on everything you're doing in powerlifting. It's your total that matters most of the time, unless you're push-pull, for example, but your total is the thing that matters, not just any one lift. So a lagging lift can be brought up and some extra attention can be given to in the program, but I do not think this would be a prudent idea for you as a powerlifter to remove focus on the other two lifts for just one big lift, because realistically, you will need a very long time frame to bring up that lagging lift, and in the meantime, the other lifts are suffering, and you don't necessarily need to do that. So as a powerlifter, some extra focus on a lagging lift is fine. You know, 10-20% of extra volume, perfect. Maybe a little extra frequency, but the focus I put on the squat would be a terrible idea. Volume or intensity work, or both? So this is a great question, and it's something that has happened for time ad nauseum. As soon as people have started training, people have always been trying to reduce training down to its simple parts and looking for the most simple answer. And it's admirable, and I totally understand that training can be complex, but there is a minimum level of complexity that training needs to be for you to adhere to it, for you to make performance increase. There is a minimum level of complexity to a system in strength training or strength conditioning or athletic development that has to be hit. It doesn't need to be too complicated, and we're all about uncomplicating programming. We're all about uncomplicating athletic development and weightlifting and sport development, because some people try and make it way too complicated. But there is a minimum level of complexity, and it can't be reduced down to a single recommendation when it comes to volume or intensity. It's not super complicated, but it does need a minimum amount of complexity when it comes to volume and intensity work. So it has to be both here. You know, the implementation or the equation for progression is quite simple. The implementation is an art, and then the outcome then is based on talent and adherence to that equation. How much value is there in copying other people versus trial and error? So these aren't mutually exclusive. Copying other people will inevitably result in some trial and error, because you will have to adjust it somewhat for yourself down to the smallest changes depending on what it is you're trying to improve upon. So in terms of copying other people, we're huge believers in success leaves clues. And so watching what the best do, if you can interpret it right, put the right context on it, you have the right requisite knowledge of what they're doing and what the sport requires and what that action is, you can learn a lot from them in regards to seeing what they do, but you just need to be able to interpret it right. So I think it's a combination of both. So looking at what other people do, making it your own. I'm sure Bruce Lee has a very good quote on this that's eluding me right now, but that idea of seeing what they're doing, see what you want to do, see what you need to improve based on what you want to do, and look at all those different aspects and seeing what their process looked like and seeing, does that make sense to me? So the more knowledgeable you are, I suppose, ironically, the less useful this will be, and in some ways the more useful it will be, because you look at a lot of stuff and you'll already understand what is probably a good or better option, Or if you're less educated, some of the stuff that might seem very, very useful might actually be incredibly bad for you or really not useful at all. So it's a combination of both. Can everyone squat 300 kilo? No. No is the answer. Certainly not high bar, full depth, upright squat. No. A few more percentage of people could probably squat low bar 300 kilos to below parallel. But can everyone squat 300 kilos? No. No, it's definitely not. It's, you know, in the same way not everyone can run a sub 10 100 meters, or in the same way that, you know, not everyone can bench 500 pounds. I don't think everyone could squat 300 kilos. If everybody in the world went squatting and squatted hard and trained really hard, a lot more people obviously would squat 300 kilos. But in regard to percentage of lifters, it's, you know, it's a pretty, it's not a massive number. Now, is there more people out there who are squatting right now that could squat 300 kilos than currently are? Probably, very, very likely. You know, they made it a specific goal of theirs and worked towards it and realized their potential and gave it the time. But no, I don't think everyone can squat 300 kilos. If you just take weightlifters who are squatting full depth, if that's what we're talking about, we're talking about a 300 kilo squat. And if you look at the number of weightlifters, all of who've been professional athletes, who have had team doctors who can squat 300 kilos, if you include super heavies, you're probably outside the double-digit numbers. But if you take out anyone under the weight of 120 kilos, or, you know, anyone who's not into the 150 plus kilo range, if you take out those people, but you can still give like Anatoly Pisarenko, you include Stefan Botev, you're probably looking at double-digit people. You could probably name people. There's probably people out there who could name a lot of those people who could squat 300 kilos in terms of weightlifting. And if there's not many weightlifters who can squat 300 plus, then realistically, you're counting out everyone below 77. Not that many 77s would probably be able to squat 300 kilos. Lou's alleged squat was 305. And I believe Lou could definitely squat 305 kilos. I don't know if Alberto Aranda squatted 300 kilos, but he definitely could squat 300 kilos if he wanted to. Maybe Pablo Lara. And then there's been a few lifters. Then we get into the 80s and 90s. There's probably a few more over the course of the years. Pierce Dimas said his squat was 320 and 280 front squat. And you believe it. Kakishvili. So there's a lot of who else? Klokov, Akeov. Those lifters, you're not long into the double digits before you look at how many people who could squat 300 plus, and certainly in terms of people who could squat 320, you're looking at such a few small percentage of lifters, like very low double digits. So no, I don't think everyone squat 300 kilos, and that's the reason I wanted to do it, I suppose, just to set myself a very large achievable goal. And yeah, I don't think it's egotistical to say that not a lot of people could do that, as evidenced by not a lot of people doing it. But as I say, there's definitely more people out there who could do it, and it'll be interesting to see. The big one is, I think the big one is if you can squat into 320 or more as a non-super high bar, that's pretty crazy. Like 322 would be the obvious goal. Sorry, Toshiki. But that would be, 322 would be not that far away either. It's only 22 kilos. Yeah. That would be it. That would be like, you'd set yourself there forever. Anyway, thanks for watching today's video. Check out the Sika Strength app on iOS or Android. We're looking at the Rotating Your Squat program if you want to improve your squat. If you want to become a horse and not just focus on your squat, but lots of PPs on the squat, run the Becoming a Horse program. Plyometrics, upper body plyometrics or upper body power work, loads of hypertrophy work, loads of squatting, loads of deadlifting. 2 blocks are now on the app. People are loving it. It's just that general training of being more powerful, being stronger, being more muscular. And now the conditioning programs on the app, I highly recommend you check it out. And we're on like version 9 of the app in like 4 or 5 months, so we're updating all the time and improving as much as possible. Lots of great feedback from the app. I'm very, very keen to keep improving it and make it the best possible app we can make it for people to train. But check it out, iOS and Android, the Sika Strength app. And I just want to say again, I'll probably finish the 300 kilo videos here. I am incredibly grateful for everyone who is so supportive. I really just didn't appreciate, as I said at the end of my 300 kilo video, how many people were waiting. So many people are like, been here since 2016 and 2017 watching, and it was still mind-blowing. So if you even look at the original video with like 20,000 views or something, the Instagram post is like 10,000 likes, there's so many comments, and it's crazy like to think look, Michael Phelps or Usain Bolt know by millions of people, but for me as an individual, it's insane to think that there was, let's say, just take those numbers, like 30,000 people just like, man, that's cool, he squatted that weight, see that. That's crazy for me. That's it's mind-blowing. So just important not to get ahead of myself and just appreciate that as well. So I'm very appreciative of everyone who is been so nice about it and so supportive. And it does mean a lot, because obviously it took a huge amount of work. Oh, actually, one question I did miss was someone saying, how does this affect my family? So that was a big thing I was very, very proud of, was that I in no way let it affect family life or career or social life to a certain extent. I made sure that my son was always gone to bed before I ever stepped into the gym. I never took training during Saturdays or Sundays during the day, always for family time. The only time I did it was 1 or 2, I think like 3 heavy sessions that I trained on a Saturday afternoon. And most of that time then was always when he was gone to bed, because I didn't want to miss a single minute, and any of the parents listening will appreciate that. And of course, then it obviously made time for my wife, etc. and all that. So there was never a point where it affected my family or career. That was a big goal of mine at the start, was to make sure that while I did love training and I hit the goal, it couldn't become all-encompassing, because the benefits of training would not have outweighed the negatives to those other areas. So it's very conscious of mine. Most sessions started at 9:15, 9 p.m. at night, and probably finished around 10, half 10, including cardio. So a lot of those, the 240 session finished, 245 by 5 finished at like 10 o'clock at night. So it's no joke. That was something that I made sure I did it. But so thanks for watching. This will probably be the last video on the 300.